Welcome to another edition of WVD Monthly, presented by XenTegra, with your host Andy Whiteside and Pete Downing, your source for all things Azure and Microsoft WVD.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of WVD Monthly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got with me the CMTO, Chief Marketing Technology Officer of XenTegra, Pete Downing. Pete, how's it going?
Good, man. How you doing, Andy? It's going good. I'm actually up in Boston this week, and my daughter's birthday is today, so pretty cool.
Oh, cool. I didn't know where you were.
Yeah, so I'm up here and spending my week with her and getting some time with her, and just happens to be her birthday today. So going to see her right after. So
I'll wish her happy birthday. Should I ask the obvious question? You're in Boston. It's the end of October. Has it gotten cold yet?
I'll say it's very fallish. It's not Charlotte weather, but it's definitely, a little cooler than what people down south are used to.
Yeah. I'll never forget my one and only trip to Boston so far in my life. I'm 47 years old tomorrow. I went, and it was late October. I may have told you the story 100 times, and it was like a 75-degree day. I've never seen so many people outside moving around, like it's just unbelievably happy to be outside. This is I believe, the summer after the year where you guys got like 12 feet of snow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when you live up here for so long. It's the April, May timeframe when it starts getting warm, people just get super excited and all that. But definitely change of pace being down in Charlotte more now. So
yeah. All right. Well, let's cover this topic here. What we're going to cover today is the September 2020 announcements for WVD. And we'll start off with the first one here. We've optimized performance by reducing connection latency in the following Azure geographies: Germany and South Africa. Is that exactly what it says it is?
Yeah. So, I mean, you got to remember that, WVD's come on almost being out 1 year. I mean, they had launched it officially last year at Microsoft Ignite, this time last year, actually a couple more weeks this time last year. And when it first came out, don't quote me on this, but it was, I think, 6 regions that it was available in across the world. And then, Microsoft made a commitment to continue to grow the amount of regions that WVD is available in. So this just shows that they're committed to the continued growth of expanding the reach of WVD to lower the round trip time and latency.
Does this mean they were actually putting compute in these locations, or they're just putting connectivity there and then backhauling it to somewhere else?
No, my understanding is they're enabling the compute aspect of it. So obviously the managed control plane aspects of the front door. So, if you've ever set up RDS on-prem, all the key pieces, you got your broker, the gateway, et cetera. They're essentially doing a managed offering up in their cloud on top, that you don't ever see, because that's the art of it, right? You just got to connect to your WVD sessions, and then you can put WVD workloads inside of the supported geographies. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes it very simple, right? That's what they're doing. And I guess that also enables countries like Germany that probably wants their intellectual property and the compute that accesses it in that geography as well, right?
Oh yeah, correct. And that's a great example. As we know, Europe's a lot stricter with, sovereignty of data, and, GDPR, et cetera. So having the data remain within the sovereign boundaries of a country is very critical. Canada is another great example. I know, when I was doing work up in Canada earlier this year and late last year, having data centers in Canada was critical too, even for Citrix. So yeah, the location does matter. And, again, this is just great to see that Microsoft's committed to continue to grow the regions and the reach of WVD.
Yeah, it's definitely, it would be a stretch to say, hey, you used to have a desktop that was on your desk. Now it's in a cloud somewhere. And by the way, it's in a cloud in another country. Yeah, I could see where that might be a problem.
Yep. So it's good. And I'll, at the end, maybe, if we got time, I'll cover some roadmap stuff that I know is coming, and we can see if it actually comes out before the end of the year.
we can go as long as you want, as long as I get home for dinner. That's all.
All right.
I'm joking, kind of. You got a birthday to get to, so yours is more important than mine. It does have a call out here about something called the Experience Estimator. Have you used that before? Does it really work?
Yeah, it's a great tool. I equate it to, you run it and it tells you what your closest front door is for a supported WVD data center, and it gives you kind of your average round trip time in the app as well. So when I talk to administrators, I say, hey, you might want to share this with users in various regions to get kind of a snippet of data, just so you can understand what data centers you should focus on. And it's just a good little tool. One of the things I'd like it to do is potentially be more scalable, meaning like, hey, I don't have to send it to users. I could simulate and say, hey, I'm sitting in Chicago today, and what's the nearest data center? I'm sitting in LA. What's the nearest data center? And you'd be surprised, like, you could run it 3 or 4 times in a row and you might get a couple different responses from different data centers. So it's kind of interesting to see that as well.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I often use the, talking point of, hey, your compute used to go from the system board to the monitor of that little bitty cable. Now it's got to go hundreds, if not thousands of miles, and latency does matter. But the way these protocols work today, it's gotten so much better than it would have been even a couple years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. The next section talks about some things, some new releases. This first one is the Windows desktop client for the Windows Virtual Desktop world. It's like 1.2.1364. And I think a lot of that's related to fixes they made. The first one talks about a fix where SSO didn't work on Windows 7. Any idea what that is?
Yeah, so the remote desktop client is unique because you have to use it in order to connect to WVD. So it's a separate client. You can buy it. You can get it. Not buy it, but you can get it in the Win 10 store now. And part of that is Microsoft is committed, obviously through action. We don't work for Microsoft, but just seeing how many times they update it in a quarter is kind of interesting. So this is a great example of they're always maintaining the client. So so they had issues with single sign-on in Windows 7, so they were able to address that. I think the next 2 bullets are interesting because they address Teams, right? And Teams is, as you and I know, is becoming more and more prevalent, especially with this whole remote work strategy. And I actually have a customer who uses Teams within the virtual desktop, scenario, and they need Teams to operate as efficiently as possible. So, obviously Microsoft is committed to ensuring that their own product works inside of a WVD session, and they continue to improve Teams, with media, video, audio, et cetera. So the middle 2 bullets are very focused on Teams and making sure that it's highly optimized for WVD scenarios.
So you're calling out here that just in general, online meetings and voice and video, bidirectional, as well as soft phones. Those are all things that are harder to do inside a virtual desktop. And the fact that somebody's using WVD means they already own the Office license or the Microsoft 365 license. And so Microsoft's doing everything they can to make Teams kind of a first-class citizen inside WVD, right? Yeah,
correct. And that's a great way to put it. So, and you continue to see improvements. Just from day 0 to now, it's a lot better. They didn't have any optimization when they first launched WVD, and now they do. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves as the next 6 months comes out.
It'll be interesting to see what other products do as well. Will they be allowed to be optimized in WVD, or will you have to move to a Citrix or a VMware if you want to use other products and have them optimized? What do you think will happen there?
That's kind of what I was alluding to. Is it'll be interesting to see if they go down, if Zoom is going to be allowed to optimize themselves. Are they going to create a SDK, or it's going to be interesting to see if they do that, because obviously not everybody wants to use Teams, but in our world, heck, I think I was on 3 different platforms today, because I talked to 3 different vendors,
I kept track of it. I was on 5 different platforms today.
Yeah. So at some point I'd love it if Microsoft released like an SDK to be able to, hey, I'm Zoom, I want to optimize inside of WVD. Hey, I'm, Ring Central, I want to optimize it. So it'd be nice to see, but I think, you still have your preferred partner, which is Citrix. And obviously Citrix has done a great job at optimizing media within the IC8 protocol. So,
yeah. And, we found that if you have enough horsepower and the latency is not too bad, if you have enough horsepower on the virtual desktop and potentially on the endpoint, you can have a pretty good session even when it's not optimized, but optimizing it and offloading it to the endpoint just makes a massive difference.
Yep. No, I agree. And so it'll be interesting to see, because let's face it, virtual meetings aren't going away anytime soon. So.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I was, I know you're a marketing guy. I think I may have alluded to this already with you, but Crossing the Chasm, the technology marketing book that I'm listening to now, and I know you listened to in the past, they made a reference in there to online meetings and web share and video sharing during the online meetings. And they made a reference how that was never going to take off because just the techies that like to do that kind of stuff. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, yeah, well, all of a sudden a pandemic shows up and everybody's meeting online and turning on webcams. And I guess they never predicted that would actually happen. Yeah,
that's true.
They use that as the example of only early adopters will ever do that. I'm like, oh, well, I guess that wasn't true.
Yep.
All right. Next one seems a little trivial. It says added a need help with settings link to the desktop settings page.
Yeah. So, again, this is just, I'd say the last two are good examples of just quick bug fixes and enhancements to help the users with the client, right? Need help with settings. It's going to link them to the various options. Because I'll be honest with you, when I first started using the client, I accidentally found the ability to right click and figure out how to full screen and not full screen and all that. And now they just kind of put it in they put it out there now to make it easier. And then the second one is, obviously, I do the high contrast dark themes all the time. I love them. And they had an issue with the button not showing up properly, and they were able to fix that. So, minor trivial stuff, but again, usability, right? So let's face it, if it's not very usable, users don't want to use it. Therefore, your project's not going to be too successful. So your goal is to ensure the usability of a product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you talking about, and not it really matters for this, but you use the dark themes on your endpoint or on your virtual desktop or both?
I love dark themes inside everything. Like I use an Outlook, I use it in the client for remote desktop. I mean, I use it whenever I can now. It's just easier on my eyes.
That's why I'm asking that question, because I think that's something I got to move to. I'm going blind here all of a sudden, especially this last 6 months of staring at a screen all the time.
Yeah, no, it's I love the dark theme, and especially in Outlook, because you're looking at Outlook all the time. So
yeah. So here's another example. This next one talks about listening to the customers, finding issues within the remote desktop client. When I say remote desktop client, is that the same thing as the WVD client? Are those synonymous?
Yeah, they're both the same thing. Yeah, and in last month, in August 2020, Microsoft released the official store app of the remote desktop client, and obviously there was a critical bug found, and they addressed it very quickly. So kudos to Microsoft for jumping on that. But yeah, this is just another good example of Microsoft, taking action when the user community found an issue, and for being net new. I mean, it was net new as of August 2020, and this just shows that they're able to address the issues pretty quickly. So yeah, there's the remote desktop client that gets installed locally, and then you can actually get it now through the Microsoft Store if you're on Win 10.
And help me with my ignorance here, because I thought the remote desktop client was part of the operating system. This is a different remote desktop client?
Yeah, so this is, you have your built-in, RDP, right? And that version does not work with WVD. You have to actually download and install a what they call the remote desktop client for, that's specifically for, WVD and can be used in conjunction with RDS environments as well. So it's a separate client, and if you don't have it, then you're not going to connect to WVD.
Yeah. Now I have a question for you on this. The remote desktop client that you get from the store, that's like an x86 traditional Windows. I forget what they call them. I listened to so many podcasts about it back in the day. Or is it a modern app, or is that concept not even exist anymore?
No, it's both. It's a traditional, x86 app, but it's also this bullet here is addressing the modern app. So the modern app is what just got launched in August 2020, and then this just shows that Microsoft jumped on the bug pretty quick for the modern app. So
okay. Do you remember what they officially call the legacy apps?
I forget. I'm brain farting too. You right click on any of them and you can put compatibility mode.
Yeah. I used to listen to Windows Weekly all the time, and they for months and months and months they talked about modern apps and whatever the legacy apps are called. And it's been so long since I listened. I don't travel as much. I don't listen to nearly as many podcasts as I used to.
Yeah.
All right. Next bullet here, let's see, talks about we've added feature that lets you change your VM location, image, resource group, prefix name, network config as part of the workflow for adding a VM to your deployment in the Azure portal. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, so when you before early days of I'll call it the ARM support for WVD. Once you named the VM, you named an image, a resource group, etc. You couldn't change it. So you now what because in our world, in the EUC world, you might have a data center change, or you might have a location change. You might want to, when you redeploy a VM, you might want to tweak the naming. So it's a little different than your traditional static data center workload, right? And so before Microsoft with the WVD portal in Azure, you weren't able to change any of the naming schemas or any of the locations, et cetera. So now when you add a VM to your the deployment group, you can now change location, name, et cetera. So it's a little bit more flexible. Because in our world, in the EUC side of the house, you might want to tweak your naming a little bit, or you might want to you don't like the naming of the VMs and you want to tweak them a little bit, So or you might find out that data center X is, location Y, data center X is faster than data center Y. So you want to move locations. So things like that. And Microsoft's just making it a little bit more flexible. And that's always been a complaint. Like, my biggest thing is like, if I named the VM, I couldn't go and rename it after the fact. I had to, you had to do it through PowerShell. And if you wanted to rename your networks, you had to do it through PowerShell. And so they're just trying to make it easier from a interaction point of view, in my opinion. So,
and is that just the referenceable name within the portal, or is that actually changing its Active Directory name as well?
In this case, it's the referenceable name in the portal. So the VM location, the image, the resource group, prefix name, the network config, like that's all stuff that's associated with the deployment. And before you couldn't change any of that. Now you can. So that's how it's displayed in the UI.
Okay.
So when you you might deploy a virtual machine and say you're going to use network X, and then you find out, I don't like the way network X is created, so I'm going to create network Y and redo it and make sure it meets all the needs of my security guys, let's say. And when you redeploy it, you want to point it to network, X or network Y. So, again, a lot of the stuff was very static prior to this change. So,
yeah. Okay, then the last bullet here talks about IT pros can now manage hybrid Azure Active Directory join Windows 10 Enterprise VMs using Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Is in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, that's the same as Intune?
Yeah, so basically, this is allowing you to, they've rebranded Intune to Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and you can now manage Win 10 Enterprise desktops officially GA'd through the endpoint management tool, as long as they're Azure AD joined. And then parallel, you'll be able to manage Win 10 Enterprise multi-session VMs as public preview right now, and it'll be fully available later this year.
And there's some benefit to doing that way versus doing it through the WVD portal, or is it just an option? What's that doing?
It's more from a security, point of view, and are you fully patched? Are you not? Are you a trusted device? Not trusted device? So compliance and security is the big driver there. So, now you can pull them into the endpoint manager tool and make sure that they're fully patched, make sure they're meeting your compliance, complexity, et cetera. And, the endpoint manager obviously manages not only Windows, but iOS, iPads, Mac OS, and Android. So it's very, it's just another, endpoint management tool, but the value here is my takeaway personally is more around compliance and security and making sure the devices are fully patched and meeting the baseline requirements for your enterprise.
Okay. Well, Pete, that's the end of the things they have listed in our article we used, but you said you had a couple other things you wanted to go through.
Yeah. So it's funny. there's a roadmap, and I'll send you the link, Andy, so you have it and you can always poke around, but I just always look at what's in development. And there's some really cool stuff coming, but I think you'll find a couple of these funny, and I just want to call them out. If you go and look, there's a lot of geos that are going to get added. So, obviously Microsoft's very committed to extending the reach of WVD. But what's interesting is, you go and look and they have, like, for example, Windows Virtual Desktop protection from screen scraping, right? So they're gonna launch a feature later this year where you can protect from screen scraping. And sounds familiar, right? So our friends at Citrix have been doing that for a while now. So so you start seeing that they're trying to get parity with some of the functionalities that their friendly partners already have. And I just find it, kind of funny to watch as this roadmap unfolds. But one of the things that, I like is they're coming out with a feature, and they're supposed to be having it in December of this year, where they're going to enable deallocated VMs to start automatically when a user connects. So we're like, right now, WVD, you almost have to you either have to use a third-party tool to provision VMs, or you have to create like an auto scale setup group, or it's just very convoluted. So they're trying to make the whole auto scale functionality a lot more scalable, if you will. And so I'm kind of excited to see what that's going to do. But I'm also it's going to be interesting to see what that does to the partner community, because there's a lot of partners out there that have built products to help with some of these stopgaps. So it's going to be interesting as Microsoft matures WVD. How does it impact the partner community? Things like MSIX app attach, right? You'll be able to manage that from the Azure portal and not have to do it through PowerShell anymore. So it's going to be, there's some interesting functionalities that are coming out. One of the other ones that you'll find interesting is direct connectivity between the client and the session host over a managed network. Sounds familiar, right?
Right.
So, just like little things like that. But yeah, so I check out the roadmap all the time, and unfortunately it only goes out to the end of the year. So I'm only seeing what they're doing in the end of the year. I think that's what they only allow publicly. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to trickle into Q1 next year once they're allowed to launch those ones. But anyway, right. I'm excited. I think Microsoft's made a lot of progress. I mean, you look just for 1 year, it's amazing to see, what a company of their size has been able to do with this motion. And again, it's going to be about 1 year since they launched it in a couple of weeks. So.
Yeah. Well, it's always been a conversation. When's Microsoft going to get serious about remote computing like this, remote desktop and app computing? And they've played along for years, and right now they really seem interested in being a major player in this space. And obviously they've got a platform to start with Azure that gives them a leg up. But they certainly have many years to catch up. But how fast they accelerate, that's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm excited and can't wait to see what's going to be launched in October, even though we're already in October, but they tend to do an end of month, it seems. But we'll talk next month and see how we're progressing.
I think one way to look at this is if you go back and look at where VMware was with Horizon, and they pretty much caught up in about 8 years. They went from just a virtual desktop with a remote PC connection to pretty much feature for feature with Citrix, the leader in the space.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
We'll see where Microsoft's going to invest, and obviously you and I know their goal is to get Azure consumption going, and nothing drives consumption like desktops and a bunch of Windows apps.
Nope. It's great.
Especially high-end consumption. I'm sitting here now, you and I have joked about it like twice today. I've got a 32 gig laptop that I'm using to run local labs and stuff on. I mean, a 32 gig something running in Azure as a desktop and that thing's going to cost a fortune.
Yeah.
It's going to go crazy.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, I appreciate it. I'll let you run and go be with your daughter for her birthday. Wish her a happy birthday from us, and we'll get this podcast posted, and we'll get prepared to do this again next month.
All right. Thanks, Andy, for having me, and looking forward to next month.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another edition of WVD Monthly, presented by XenTegra, with your host Andy Whiteside and Pete Downing. Thanks to podcast episode guests. Podcast produced by Pete Downing. If you are interested in joining a XenTegra podcast, email info@XenTegra.com. Podcast copyrighted by XenTegra, LLC.